Then at last she was gone. The doors closed and I drew in a sigh of relief. I pushed for the second floor. Finally, this ordeal was over, I thought. But I was just getting ahead of myself, sadly. For as the doors opened to the second floor, I found myself immediately off-put by the way the floor was set up. There were no doors, you see, not like the regular setup, where they were all in a row. Instead, it was just a blank wall with no indication of any guest rooms at all. I considered waiting and riding back to the first floor, but Will was somewhere amidst this maze, I realized. So I stepped out and began to explore. The carpet made no sound as I walked and explored the long hall. My eyes always turned back to make sure the elevator was still there, but nothing else ever was. There wasn't even an indication as to where the illumination was coming from. It was just this sort of artificial glow that seemed to emanate no matter how far down the hall I went. Then I stopped and I looked down towards the end of the hall and turned around and looked back at the elevator. It was squarely in the middle of the hall. No matter how many steps forward I took, nor how many back, it was an endless hallway. Then I heard a door open behind me. "Well," I whispered, turning towards the elevator. But now it too was gone in this nightmare. Instead, only the walls remained in a single guest room. K7. Again? How could that be if I was on the second floor? I wondered as I went up to it and knocked softly. It seemed to be the only thing to do. Then it opened, and I found myself staring at a man that reminded me of a 1930s detective comic with a fedora and a long trench coat. He was tall, a bit foreboding, but he didn't even so much as make a move towards me as I stood at his doorway, so I figured I should be the first to talk. "Hello, my name is..." "No longer matters," he told me softly as he finally opened the door wider and let me inside. I shuffled in, curious to see how he had set up room 7K. It was no longer empty like when Will and I had visited. Instead, the detective had layers upon layers of diagrams, photographs, and notes pinned on the walls. There didn't seem to be a bit of empty space anywhere except in one singular part of the wall, where he had used his fingernails to scratch out a message. "Who is woman?" it read, as I sat down in one of the chairs and he went to get me coffee, my eyes wandering his messy research. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "That doesn't matter either. What matters is where I'm going next," the detective replied. "And where might that be?" I asked. He returned a moment later with coffee and smiled at me, his gestures and features a bit more shaky now. Was he the one nervous? He looked familiar as I caught his eye, and I saw a briefcase next to him on the floor. Was that the same one from the tourist? The one that once had journals in it? "This belonged to someone. You have to return it to them, and don't take the journals if you want to see your brother again," he said, passing it to me. "How do you know about that? And how do I find someone who's already dead?" "I've seen that same briefcase. It's what led me here with notes from my brother," I said in confusion. "Time works differently when you're already inside the game. We no longer exist, and yet can't leave this place. I'm bound to this place now that we've met," the detective answered before I could even get my next words out. I looked towards his walls of evidence. "You came here to find something, didn't you?" I asked. All this felt foreboding. An inevitable destiny that I couldn't escape. His eye twitched. I stood up and examined the photographs. Some of them were just of empty hallways. Others were of the woman at a distance, never in full view, always blurry. Some of them were of me. And then there were new articles, of buildings across the world, similar to the ones that I had seen online of different variations of the elevator game, but these were far older, all the way back before World War I. And in some of those same photos, I saw my brother, trapped in the past, chasing for an exit. But instead, you became trapped. A prisoner to this place, I realized, as I returned to the mess in his room. We're all prisoners here. Even her, he said with a whisper. And he looked towards the wall where he had scrawled his question. Do you think you'll ever know the answers? I asked. I think I have them all, but you won't like it, the detective told me. Then he pulled his coat a smidge and showed me a loaded revolver in his belt holster. My eyes grew big as he unhooked it and cocked the weapon. The barrel of the gun pointed straight at my head. He twisted it upwards towards his temple and pulled the trigger, blasting his brains out as I watched in numb horror. His body fell to the floor as a limp doll. I darted from the room, too frightened to stay another moment. To my relief, the elevator had returned. I took the briefcase and I didn't look back until I made it to the lobby, back to my own world. I didn't stop until I got back to our room and hid the briefcase under my bed again. I was expecting to see the other one where I had left it, but it was gone. Or it had never been there. I wasn't sure. My father came in to check on me. He had a worried look, probably hadn't gotten any sleep all since my brother disappeared. He asked if I was feeling up to doing a little housekeeping. I told him yes. Anything to keep my mind off of what happened to Will. He sent me up to the 7th floor again to shampoo the carpets in the room. I almost dreaded going back to that cursed room. But eventually my sense of well-being and calm returned. I was safe now in this world. The directions the detective gave me were clear, and I knew it would be impossible for me to ignore them forever, I thought as I brought the briefcase to the room. I had to obey the secret rules if I wanted to find Will. Especially when I found something stashed in the vent in that suite. The screws had been loosened ever so slightly, and it seemed as though it had happened recently. Reaching inside, I found a small paper bag. Inside was a .42 revolver. It had the distinct smell of having been discharged recently. How was this world connected to the one that I had been lost in? I put the briefcase on the bed, and I looked at the gun a little closer. It had Will's initials on it, just like I expected. Then I heard a noise, something from the hall. I turned and I looked up to see a familiar face. The tourist. He was alive. He looked like he had come to this room searching for someone. When he saw me, his eyes got big and he grabbed the suitcase and ran. Instinct took over me and I dashed after him. I think I ran harder than I'd ever had in my entire life. The way his eyes danced, it lit up when he saw. It told me that he knew something. He had answers about Will, so desperate, that fact that I could only faintly hear his footsteps. I was hauling ass. I turned the corner. I saw him. He paused for a moment to try and consider his next move, and I used that moment to rush towards him. He turned towards me, shocked to see that I was still in pursuit, and started running again, but it was too late. I tackled him down, my arms intertwined against his chest, fumbling to the carpet floor. The briefcase went flying. We tumbled and tossed for a few moments as we fell, his right hand reaching for something in his pocket. I got to it first. It was a switchblade. For some reason, I felt a rush of frustration and anger take over me, and I held it next to his skin. Stop! Just stop, okay? I don't want to hurt you, I ordered. Thankfully, he obeyed. He froze and reached his hand towards my face before asking, Why'd you follow me to the grave? I pushed myself off of him and muttered, I came to find my brother. And I knew that you would have answers. What did you mean by that? He got in a crouched position, wiping sweat from his brow, and muttered, You're not supposed to be here. Unlucky. I don't give a damn about your stupid ritual. Now, you're gonna come with me. We're gonna find him together. Right, we're gonna translate your damn journals and maybe piece together what I need to do next, I told him, waving the switchblade back and forth. No, I can't leave, he insisted. It looked like he was going to run again, so I quickly sidestepped and twisted his arm, putting the blade against his back. Look, I know this is important to you, and you can get back to your stupid game once you help me find Will, I snapped and replied. Don't make me do this. Please, I just want answers. He hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded reluctantly as we moved towards the elevator. I picked up the briefcase and took it with us and asked where we were supposed to take it. I don't know. The game's never been played out this way, he admitted. Once the elevator door was closed, I slumped to the floor of the box in relief and started to breathe in and out rapidly. That run had taken the last of my energy. This isn't going to go the way that you planned, the tourist warned me. I was about to ask him what he meant by that when suddenly the elevator shook. Then it stopped altogether. We were in between floors 2 and 3. It was stuck. Just like I'd feared. The lights flickered, and I heard the tourist begin to chant and pray. Get a hold of yourself! We're gonna get out of here, I told him, making him look me in the eyes. He said nothing and just looked at the ground, his lips trembling, and then the lights flickered again and I saw out of the corner of my eye what was troubling my passenger. We were no longer alone in the elevator. She had returned. As soon as I saw her pale legs and bare feet, it was like pins and needles were being stuck against my skin. I was hardly able to move and I wanted to hyperventilate, and the man that was there alongside, a man I had seen dead only days before, was not offering any substantial information to make the situation better. His eyes were glued shut and he was chanting. We needed the prayers, that's for sure, because this was definitely something I couldn't figure out what to do. The woman just stood there, barely out of my line of vision. I knew her eyes were on me, even if I didn't look. She was waiting for us to acknowledge her. And that terrified me. I was sure at any moment she would make a move and reach out and touch me, and it only made me want to vomit. Why was I acting like this? I had nothing to connect her to being dangerous other than the words on a stray note, yet I knew it as soon as I saw a glimpse of her. She was deadly. Powerful. So instead I focused on what I could do. I whispered to the tourist to try and draw him out. How long have you played this game? I asked quietly. I knew of course she could hear us, but I figured a distraction might make things easier. After all, we had been there 2 hours stuck, and I already knew my cell phone wasn't working. We were trapped until we figured out what she wanted. It's just another part of the game, I told myself. I had to keep telling myself also that it was a game that could be won. After what I had seen happen to both the tourist and the detective, I wasn't so sure. Years, the tourist finally said after what had been the longest pause. Why? What's the point? What are you after? I asked, scooting closer. It's difficult to explain in mere words. There's more to it than just an end goal. It's an experience that can't be rationalized. You felt this too. It's why you're here, the tourist explained. I couldn't deny that. More than anything, though, I wanted to find Will and get him back to our side. But now that I think on it, I've grown to understand a little about what the tourist means. It's enticing. These kinds of secrets. You think you understand the world and how it works, and then you see or feel something that doesn't fit, like a woman standing in an elevator. Just standing. and waiting for you to open up to whatever is beyond your reach. That sort of beyond is downright terrifying, if I'm being fucking honest, because it can't be sorted out. It's an infinite unknown. It's like a black hole drawing everything and everyone into its hungry maw. We're going to get out of here, I told him. The tourist didn't seem so sure. It's not possible. I told you already, it won't let me leave. This is karma, bad karma. For even attempting it, he said, shaking his head vehemently. We can do it if we work together, I told him, and pointed slowly towards the roof of the elevator. There was a case of some kids that got trapped in here a few years back. Dad had to climb down the rope and haul them out. I saw him do it. I know there's an emergency release button for the doors on every floor, I told him gently. Do you think escape is that easy? He laughed as he pulled his legs up to his shoulders and crouched in fear. He was paralyzed with indecision, convinced that his fate was already decided. Maybe he wasn't wrong. I had seen him die. Could something like that be erased? I had to try. I stood up, focusing on the latch overhead. It wasn't very big. We'd have to slip through one at a time. You're going first. Then you're going to help me and pull me up. He continued to shake his head no, and I sighed, realizing he needed some kind of convincing. And sadly, the only thing I could threaten him with was only mere feet away. Listen to me. If you don't do this, I'll make sure that you talk to this thing and get stuck here forever. You hear me? I snapped. The tourist stopped shaking and thought about my warning. Then he got up and nodded vaguely, keeping his eyes on the floor. I'll help. You won't believe me until you see for yourself, he remarked. I didn't have the time to ask what he meant by that, so I cupped my hands and gestured towards the ceiling. I'll boost you up, I told him. Just as he was getting ready to lift up, I felt the girl move closer to me. She was alarmed by the fact that we were leaving. I could feel her breath on my neck. Let's go, I urged the man. He used his nimble fingers to push the latch and then carefully slid it open, giving us a view of the long, endless chasm that stretched on above. It seemed to go for miles. He tossed the case up first. I wobbled a bit and pushed him up, encouraging him to climb. I felt a cold hand against my shoulder. She whispered in my ear, "Don't go." It felt so terrifying. Such a simple phrase. I wanted to respond. It took all of my willpower not to. Help, I urged the tourist. For a short moment, I thought he was going to leave me there, with her. Then he returned in the crawl space a moment later and extended his hand. I grabbed the hold of it, and he started to lift. Surprisingly, for a man his size, he was able to haul me up with ease. Once on the roof of the elevator, I gestured above to the dim light that was pouring into the shaft from the doors above. That's our way out. Below us, the girl began to scream. The tourist clenched his fingers against the side of the elevator and muttered, "There is no way out of here." Enough of that, I shouted as I reached in my pockets. The whistle. It might have been the only item I haven't used. I blew hard on it. The elevator shook, and I grabbed the cables and told the man to do the same. Will needed me. I blew on the whistle again once we were against the rope and had a firm hold on it. Then below us, the elevator dropped, and I heard her screams reverberate throughout the elevator shaft, and it seemed to grow louder the further it fell. "There's an emergency switch! Press it!" I told him, gesturing towards the left side of the door. The doors slid open slowly, and I saw the familiar drab carpets. Just as they finished opening, the elevator began to move and come towards us. "She wants us to stay with her. Forever," the tourist squealed as he clenched the briefcase. "Move it!" I told him. We scrambled to get into the third-floor hallway. It was mere seconds before the elevator rode up to meet us, and felt certain the doors would open and the ghost would come attack, yet instead, as they did stop, I was shocked to find the box now empty. She had vanished. "We're in hell," he muttered. My heart finally stopped beating like a drum as I looked about the empty corridor. I don't really care where we are. You need to tell me how to return this damn thing so we can go get my brother back, I said. gesturing to the suitcase. It won't be possible, he insisted. I sighed, ignoring his banter for a moment as I searched for the stairs. A few moments later, I realized I couldn't find them. Then, when I returned to the hallway, I found the tourist was missing, and one of the doors was ajar. I leave for 5 seconds, and you're just trying to run? I muttered as I entered the room. Then I froze as I realized why it looked familiar. It was the same room Will and I had found him in the first night, dead. The tourist was sitting on the edge of the second bed, clutching his briefcase and nervously fidgeting as I entered. He looked towards me. I told you not to come. You said that it would be bad. Now the bad luck will befall me. I went against it. Now I'm a part of it. He sounded extremely distressed. Part of the game? How is that possible? I asked him. He unlocked the briefcase and took out the notebooks where he had scribbled probably 1,000 times before. The one who seeks all will come to finish my game. I can't leave the room. You have to go in my place, he told me. What do you mean you can't finish? We just... The words didn't even leave my mouth. I turned towards the door only to find it had gone entirely. The room was making sure his destiny came true. I've become part of the game, but you don't have to, he said when I turned back to him. I think I want to see the consequences through. Of what happens when you defy it, he told me anxiously. There was a knock on the wall where the door should be. Hide in the bathroom. Please, you must hide to live, to finish the game and find your brother, he insisted. I heard the knock again. It was loud. How did it expect to enter the room without any doors? I hurried to the bathroom and closed the door almost all the way, letting it peek just a tad to see what would happen. I wish I hadn't. The knock came again and the tourist cleared his throat. I'm ready. I'm in. Something in the wall moved. It formed an outline right where the door should have been and took the shape of a body. It was tall but had no head to call its own. The clothes it wore resembled something of a traditional bellboy, and in its hand was a long razor sickle, glistening in the dim light. The headless apparition moved towards the tourist, and I watched in bewilderment as the man offered his left arm out to the beast. Without a word, it sliced apart his appendage. The briefcase fell from the severed hand, and the creature retrieved it. Then, just as quickly, the creature slipped back into the walls. I rushed out to him and saw that he was covered in his own blood. He was crying and shaking in shock. I couldn't tell if they were tears of joy or hopelessness. The way will be clear to you. I understand it all at last. Thank you. I'm free, he said, as his lips trembled and he fell to the floor. I looked over to the wall and I saw the door had magically reappeared. And for a brief moment I glanced back at the tourist. His severed hand was moving with a mind of its own, scrawling those mysterious numbers on the carpet and the walls in blood as the door hung open. The game urged me to continue. I didn't look back towards the lifeless eyes of the tourist this time. I'd seen that before. Now the future was unfurling before me, and it was limitless. I felt like maybe I did have a chance to find Will. I returned to the hall, trying to find another clue. I stumbled backwards and I saw the elevator was gone. I took it back to normalcy. I looked about the hallway, wondering what ghosts would come next. And then I heard it behind me. That same knocking. I zipped through the halls until I could find the stairs. Thank God they finally showed themselves, and I didn't stop until I reached the 6th floor, finally too exhausted to keep going and collapsed near a window. The hazy red sky beyond my hotel told me that I was still trapped in the game. As I slammed my fist against the glass, I began to cry, wishing the stupid game would end. I'd seen death several times. I'd been haunted by monsters beyond imagination. I just wanted to find Will, and so far, all I had done was return the briefcase to a ghastly monster, and now with nothing to tell me where to go, I felt I was at the end of my rope. Then I felt the hand touch my shoulder and Lily jumped and screamed. It was the detective. Except he didn't look as old as he had when we first met. before he killed himself. His face was clean-shaven, and at last I knew why I recognized his eyes. Will, it's you. Oh my God, I said, holding back into the scream. I hugged him as tight as I could, not wanting that moment to end. But as we pulled away from each other, I realized his eyes were tainted with sadness. How long have you been here? I asked him. Doesn't matter. You managed to return the rules of the game. That means I can finally go home, he said with a smile. But I saw you die. I saw you trapped here, I said. Another time, another place, another game. But rules are made to be broken, even if you don't understand the consequences, he said as he passed me something. It looked like the mirror I had used to protect myself when I first arrived at this strange place. Watch me leave through this mirror, and I can go back to being young. Wait, what? What do you mean? What consequences? I asked. I can return. But you have to stay now. You're now part of this. That's how this works. The game always wins. You became the ghost. I looked down at my skin. I saw that I'd been running for so long, I was barefoot. My skin lacked color from the lack of sun. Probably looked disheveled and defeated. And I realized why the woman from the elevator had frightened me so. She was me. Behind us, I saw the elevator was materializing, and the knocking returned. The creature was hunting Will, determined to make sure he couldn't leave. I'm sorry, Lindsay. I'm sorry I did this to you. I promise I will try to find a way to get you out of here, he said with tears in his eyes, as he told me to hold the mirror up. No, you can't. Take care of Dad. That's your job now. You have to promise me that you'll make sure that he's okay, I said as I tried not to cry. My aged brother knew that my father would likely never understand what had happened, but no further words were spoken between us. He mouthed another apology as the elevator opened. I saw in the reflection of the mirror that he suddenly reverted to being young again. And then the doors closed. And I was alone. The knocking got louder. It overwhelmed me. I recalled what the tourist had said. I'm ready. Come on, I said. Then the headless creature appeared from the wall, holding the briefcase and offering it to me. I took it, and I went to the room where this all began and sat down, looking at the drab walls and the endless abyss that I was trapped in. Tears in my eyes as I realized that now I was going to be here for God knows how long, waiting for the cycle to repeat. I read the notes, now no longer in Chinese but in my own tongue, written by my hand. The tourist will come again and steal this from me, I thought as my fingers tapped against the briefcase. But this time, I must make sure he doesn't leave here with the hidden rules. The elevator game will live on, but the hidden rules must never be found. I was wrong to think they revealed the truth. No. They only make you a part of this sick and twisted game. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. And if you're not listening to tonight's episode of the podcast, then you can on Spotify or other places that people listen to podcasts, because I only use Spotify. And if you're not watching tonight's video, then you can on YouTube. And nowhere else, because that's the only place I upload videos. And if you've done both of those things, then I want to say thank you for subscribing and clicking that like button and leaving a comment that's nice and friendly that I can respond to and give a little heart to. A big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jakob Fenske, Stephanie Butler, Jordan Humble, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, William Wellington, Emma, Brenna Crow, LaQueda Canizales, Smiley the Psychotic, Dante, Kinkade, SimbasBloodyMojo, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, Bastion Beefcake, M, Jesus Cornejo, Yarghoul, Clownible, Amber Clark, Jay Kierns, Dakota Lane Whetstone, Himbo Jerry, Crusader Chocobo, Adamarius, Estebean, Nate Cull, Our Minsect Time, Xylobones, Angelus, Seclude, Salty Surprise, Lebeda Galvin, That Creepy Chick, Red Shadow Cat, Turtleman, Cryolinian, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Ika Limchalk, Dirty Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Picamel, Melted Lake, Tali Sue, William King, Darth Miver, Sashi Suzaku, Coconut 509, Stricket, Freddy Krueger, Lisa Cottrell, Hades Nephew, Acid System, Mog, Kiri the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Nico Kyle, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. To all of you guys, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for being a huge support to me. Thank you to everybody who's in the description down below, and thank you to everyone who can even support $1 just on Patreon to help keep the content coming.